My name's John Grady, and I'm a sculptor based in Seattle, Washington. Showing in an airport, and specifically this airport, is really exciting to me. And in particular, at SeaTac, the location for this sculpture, Boundary, is at the high point of an entry. So the way you come into this terminal, the only way you come into this terminal, is up escalators or a glass elevator, and you're then underneath my sculpture. And as you come in, you're actually coming from below the sculpture, so it's framing your entry into this airport. For me, I was really inspired by how this emerging from below could really parallel this idea of being below the ground plane, or the boundary between above ground and below ground. Most people are very harried when they're in the airport, at least initially. They're trying to sort of find where it is they need to go. But then there's this nice moment where they've found where they need to go and they've got this downtime and they can decompress. And I think that's our opportunity with art. I like the idea of catching people even in their kind of frenzied state, and I think some of that will happen, but I think there'll be this moment of seeing it and then there'll be this circling back. And I love a piece of art that rewards you to come back and re-experience it after initial impressions. I'm very attached to continuing doing art in public space, and especially as we widen the idea of different types of public spaces. Airports are a wonderful example, but also if it can show up in some kind of a public plaza, a place that we don't even necessarily associate as a forum for something we display. So the more that we come across art in a way that's unexpected, the more excited I become about it. I think there is a different way of approaching art if you've got a piece that's going to live in somebody's home or in a private kind of corporate context versus something that's widely open to the public. But I think what they share for me that's universal is the idea that you come to the piece of art, you're drawn in, there's maybe an element of initial wonder, but I'm also very interested in marrying that with there being enough interest in that piece that you want to return, you want to come back to it, and you want to discover. You're rewarded for that return time and time again. So when we have something in a public space, we all have access to it, and I think that's a really rich and wonderful. The only problem I have with private art is it's not very egalitarian, you know. But that said, you know, there are wonderful examples of people that spend modest sums of money and they get a wonderful piece. It doesn't have to be a grand piece. It could be an exceptional piece and of modest scale. And I think to live with a piece in your day-to-day life, that's another wonderful thing. It's just very different. And for me, I guess I'm more drawn to these public pieces because you're reaching so many people, and that's very rewarding.
Heartening Statias Jayachat, heartening Statias Jayachat, heartening Statias Jayachat.
My name is Bud Turner. I'm a carver for the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe. And for thousands and thousands of years, they've been creating these form lines and these lines. And if you really start to study it, you can see a set of laws that they used when they were reproducing or when they were making their art. And you could just see, you can start to understand how everything went together. You know, how the lines went together, how the designs went together. When was certain forms of the design used? When was it not used? How was it turned into more of a three-dimensional art form? And so they wrote it all down. It's all there. And I just took what they did and tried to interpret it.
My name is Lonnie Greninger, and I'm a citizen of the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe. I currently serve my people as the vice chairwoman of the tribal council, our governing structure. What you're seeing here is a physical depiction of Chief Chichmahan, and he was our chief from 7 generations ago, and he also happens to be my grandfather from 7 generations ago. We use the totem poles as a visual structure for our artwork, but also our storytelling. Totem poles are extremely important to our culture. We didn't have any writing systems. This was the way that we depicted all of our history, our victories, our challenges, and all of our myths and legends that have these important life morals and stories that we need to pass on from generation to generation.
For thousands of years, they had essentially 3, 4, 5 colors, which was the black, the red, and the blue-green, and then they had the white, you know. They were predominantly the colors that they would use. That was their traditional palette. I followed their rules.
Hatning statias jaya chat. Hatning statias jaya chat. Hatning statias jaya chat.
I'm Molly Sides. I have a local rock and roll band called Thunder Pussy here in Seattle. Writing has always been a big part of my life, you know, just journaling and I think at a young age I was always making up songs, and that was my way of processing the day. When my father died, and I think when that happened, it was like the only way for me to even go through a process of grieving. I think for me it was to go into a space alone and create. And so for me that process was this pivotal moment for me where I realized I could really walk into a space, be alone, and just listen to myself and go through the emotions and watch them unfold and kind of pull them together and know that I could bring in movement and music and just a lot of emotion into a creation. But yeah, that was one of those really powerful moments of we are truly all connected, and we go through these emotions. We live, we love, we die. We're left with so much when someone leaves us. So how can we, how can we share those stories or those emotions, because that's what makes us human. When I write, it can be very personal, whether I'm journaling or writing poems or weird short stories or lyrics. But it's always, for me, I find it's more important for me to share it than to keep it hidden in the binding of my books. I think that just standing up in front of people is powerful and important. It's not just you up on a stage. It has to be a space where everyone's in it, that everyone's heard. Then we realize our music is where the power is. We don't necessarily we don't want to be a band where we feel as though we're attacking anyone. We want people to come to us. We want to hold space. We don't want to put up walls. We rather build a table than a wall. I think art is very powerful.
Gahu kinena haga nanenena. My name is Rowdy, and I am an artist, culture practitioner. This is a chant from where I'm from, the Mariana Islands, which is also known as Guam or Guahan, to call in our mothers, called Nanananahu. I think I'm still on a journey to figure out what artistry means to me, but I know that when people are able to express themselves fully and authentically and truthfully, I think that's when it's fun. I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school my entire life and wore uniforms. And also Guam is a militarized space, so there's a really strong sense of, I guess sometimes you could say the masculine, sometimes toxic masculine in a way. So for me, in my gender, in my identity, it's hard for me to express myself fully and safely. When I was a little boy and I would wear my mom's skirts when she would go off to work, I would just put it on and I would just twirl, and it just felt so freeing. But I knew I couldn't do that with my dad there or with my this society, you know. So when I wear this, I try to think about that little boy who felt free in a moment. I guess still wants to be free a little bit. So I've been learning more ways that I can connect my personal to political, right? Through gender, through identity, through environment, through culture. And I think through those avenues, I'm learning, I guess, how to be an artist here. I am a very expressive person, but I'm really shy. Can you tell I'm really shy? But I think by wearing things, it allows me to access things in myself that I don't really normally have to be able to access. And I think clothing is a really great way to do that. And so I think a part of what I'm doing is transforming a lot of grief into joy. And I think that's what we have to do as humans, because there's so much that we feel, so much that we experience, so much that we hold that we don't release. And I'm just looking for ways to release. Because when we release, we feel more free. We get to fly a little bit, we get to swim. We get to feel grounded in the ways that makes us feel in our truth. I love pink and blue in a way. I wear this because it's kind of like that binary of pink is girls, blue is boy, but I don't know, let me wear them both because I am both, right? I have a lot of feathers because my dad, he raised chickens, mostly for cockfighting. So I remember having to feed them and care for them. So this is my ode to my rooster self. This is my crown in a way. And I like to say this is my crown to reach to the cosmos, to the heavens.
I'm Lisa Myers-Bulmash. I am a visual artist who specializes in collage, assemblage sculpture, and altered books. Art was mostly on the periphery of my life until around 2012. I just assumed that that wasn't really my thing, and so I became a writer instead, because that was also still creative. And then around 2012, when all the videotaped shootings of young black men and young black women started happening, that was when things started to become more personal. I am choosing to say things that I once thought I couldn't say, at least not out loud or not to somebody who didn't understand me and already know me. Sometimes it's easier for women to stand up for somebody else rather than themselves. Having a son made me realize that I could stand up for him. I was starting to realize that it doesn't matter how vulnerable, how cute, how protected, how safe I think he is. He's still vulnerable. But it took a few more years for me to realize that I could say the things that were on my mind. It took me a long time to realize that not only did I have my own story that somebody might want to hear and might relate to, that it was worth talking about. I'm saying some things that are very personal, very important to me, and that something in my work will also speak to the most personal, vulnerable part of people. So this piece is called The Ingratitude of the Girl. Anna Maria Judge, or Ani, as she sometimes called herself, was one of only 2 enslaved people on George Washington's properties and plantation who escaped from the plantation and never was caught. This was a time where she was barely counted as humanoid. She was property. It's asking for a $10 reward, which I realize was probably a big deal back then, but the idea that George Washington put an ad in the paper the same way somebody today would put an ad in the paper that said, "Lost dog," that just floors me.
I'm Steve Jensen from Seattle, Washington. I'm a visual artist of Scandinavian descent, making boats. The boats are meant to be the symbolic voyage or journey to the other side. My family is from Norway. My father was a fisherman. My grandfather was a fisherman. My other grandfather was a boat builder. I remember my father sitting at the kitchen table and trying to get rid of his accent. They changed my name from Sven to Steve. They wanted to assimilate into America. I think they were doing it for my benefit, but they took my heritage and kind of threw it away. Unless you're Native American, we all are immigrants. You know, I'm 1 generation immigrant from an immigrant. We're all an immigrant. We need to keep our identity. I was very honored to be able to carve the door handles for the museum. I incorporated contemporary images of Nordic images. Here we have a fish, we have a heart for love, a sailboat, a starfish, a tree. I wrapped the area where you'd hold the handles with rope to resemble my grandfather's fishing boat. When I got into college, I was majoring in accounting, knew that I didn't really want to be an accountant. I was 19 years old. I told my parents that I was going to quit accounting school, I was going to go to art school, and I was gay, and kind of never looked back. It doesn't matter on what level you make art. You know, I think it's the important that you can express yourself. Take something in your life and turn it into something beautiful. The boats for me, the deaths were like extremely tragic. The reason why I'm making boats. My best friend died of AIDS. 2 years later, my father committed suicide. He put a gun in his mouth and he shot himself. 2 years and 2 days after that, my mom, well, she fell apart and went crazy, and then she died. 2 years after that, my former partner of 24 years drank, and alcohol was his escape, and so it was alcohol that got to him. So what I'm attempting to do is take something that was extremely tragic in my life and turn it into something beautiful. It's been very much a healing process for me, you know, dealing with my own personal grief and loss. Something tragic or something bad happens in your life, turn it into something beautiful. I'm trying to embrace my heritage through my art in the making of boats and deal with my own personal grief and loss, and hopefully the grief and loss of everybody.